You might not be aware, but you are in a very unusual place at the moment, unless you're online, in which case you're probably at home. Um, if you're in this auditorium, you are in one of the few event spaces that has both good cellular and good Wi-Fi. I'm sure that everyone here has spent too much time in conference rooms and meeting rooms inside a building or in a basement where perhaps there's no cellular, the Wi-Fi needed complicated passwords to get online, and you couldn't get connected. Here, thankfully, we're in an advantageous location. The other thing that is unusual about this is we are at a major cellular industry conference with an indoor session. And in my experience, that's very unusual. You tend to have to go to dedicated events on small cells or DAS or other specialist indoor products and solutions to actually get the attention. Hopefully, we're going to rectify that and also increase the overall focus of the industry on indoors. So you'll have heard me ask a few questions. I'm an industry analyst and general troublemaker. My screen name is Disruptive Dean. My company is Disruptive Analysis, and I try to live up to that brand. And I do a lot of things. I look at cellular, Wi-Fi, satellite, fiber, spectrum, broadband policy, and a lot more. And I specialize in asking nasty questions, so I'll probably expect to get a few back during this session myself. So let's take a little bit of a step back and context. And we heard just now about the integration of different wireless networks and convergence between terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks. And I want to talk a little bit more about divergence. Because from my point of view, what's happening in the wider industry is we're going from a world which we've had for 30 years of like the 4G era setup. In most countries, there were 3 or 4 national MNOs, maybe some MVNOs, and perhaps outsourced tower companies. And pretty much every country looked like that, with a few variations and national orientation towards perhaps regional licenses. But pretty much that was the template. What we also see is everyone has been talking about industrial transformation, and we've been assuming that 5G would transform industries, whether it's automotive or manufacturing or education or healthcare. 5G was transformative. But what no one really recognized was the first industry to be transformed by 5G was the telecoms industry. And we're already in this much more heterogeneous landscape, both on the outdoor and indoor worlds, where we're getting consolidation of the traditional MNOs, we're getting new entrants, but we're also getting indoor specialists providing neutral host services. We're getting industrial, both private networks and sort of private MNOs in a way for some sectors. You're finding governments, cities, utility companies, all building their own networks. You're seeing hybrid MNOs and MVNOs that are maybe using Wi-Fi as well for indoor use. Or they're trying to offload from their host MNO. So there's this whole explosion of new types of network owner and service provider. And I think that 6G is going to accelerate that, especially when we think about the use cases that are going to emerge. And we'll come through and talk about that in a second. But what I'd say is even the 5G era, we heard about 80% of mobile traffic. I would assume that therefore implies about 8% of mobile value. So when you see all these GDP numbers associated with 5G, you can pretty much assume that there's a proportionate amount that is indoor usage. All of the sort of, or pretty much all of the cool things we talked about, whether it's education, healthcare, industrial automation, AR, VR, gaming, business collaboration, almost all of that is indoors. Outdoors, you have obviously utilities, anything to do with vehicles, fixed wireless access, but it's 80-20 or maybe 70-30. It depends a little bit. When you look at the traffic stats, you have to break out fixed wireless access as a special case. And I'm not seeing anything at the moment to suggest that 6G use cases are going to look any different to that. And I should say, this is cellular traffic. If you add in Wi-Fi traffic for things like smart TVs, it's probably more like 95% of all wireless use is indoors. And there's a bit of it's a complicated diagram. There's a couple of things that are going on here, which is we've got some applications and uses and networks, which I'll call indoor native. They're things like Wi-Fi in your house, where it sort of lives indoors. It could be residential, it could be enterprise, and there's other things that might be the internal smart building system for IoT in an office or a factory. And then you've got the outdoor to indoor flavor of wireless, whether that's cellular, traditional broadcast, some IoT networks are inherently outdoor to indoor. And then you have satellite, which is outdoor to outdoor, and usually doesn't go indoor at all. And I think that when we look at this, we see different approaches, whether it's bringing outdoor public cellular indoors, either through the wall or with a dedicated indoor system. We might also find there's private networks for a factory or for a warehouse, perhaps with an overlap between them, and we'll talk through that. The last point before I bring on the next speaker is just how much indoor floor space there is. And so Europe has about 25 billion square meters of indoor space. Probably about 70–75% of that is residential, either single family homes or multi-dwelling units, but the rest is places like this, or retail, or offices, or factories, or airports. All of them very different requirements and very different needs, but all very important. And the cost of providing good indoor wireless can be huge. And we need to think about any solutions we have for 6G need to be able to scale to those numbers and fast. There's no good saying, you are, running a 200-person hotel, and you are number 5,826 on the queue for getting an indoor system, and we'll get to you in 15 years' time. We need to be able to think about scalable solutions for indoor 6G. And with that, I will hand over now to the first of the four panelists, who is Professor Akihiro Nakamura from Tokyo University, who hopefully is going to be able to attach his laptop. Okay. And thank you. And I'll be bringing people back up on stage after a couple of presentations, and then I'll introduce the rest of the panelists. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Aki Nakao from the University of Tokyo. I think my role here is to present some of the use cases of private network in Japan. So we do lots of beyond 5G, 6G research, but today I only talk about the local 5G private networks. So in Japan, we have a very interesting regulation called local 5G. The people like us can get a license and play like a telcos, as Dean mentioned today. And but this is very different from telecommunication services. So then government invested a whole lot of money on this because we don't know how to utilize this private network and the local 5G network. So for the past 5 years, government invested almost like 150 million euros. And we have 45 field experiments already. And well, it includes outdoor experiment also, but some of them are indoor experiment. And I like to be short, and I like to introduce just one indoor example of the use cases of local 5G. So have you ever heard of avatar robots? And so we talk about avatar robots in our presentation, like a PowerPoints, but this is the real service that ANA, the airline itinerary company, started, this startup company. And this is providing the robots with a screen, and it's actually showing the people behind, the human behind it. And then how they operate these robots is that, for example, well, this is, by the way, the objective of this avatar robots is that, we like to resolve the workforce shortage. Every country has this problem, and replace a human with the robots. But okay, let's look at this example. So this is a regional airport, Hachijo Island Airport, and not many people are living there. Not many people are visiting there. But NTT Docomo from Nakamura-san, sitting over there, need to do a provision of the telecommunication services there. And of course, they can't put capacity there, but people here using the robots and telling people how to buy tickets, how to have a map of the island, and all kinds of services are provided by robots. Okay, and now we are putting local 5G base stations there. So by the way, on the right-hand side picture, so this is our handmade base station, which is a commercial grade quality, but it's using the band N79, which is the 4.7 gigahertz, a little bit high mid-band. And this can do a 4-layer MIMO, by the way. And we are connecting lots of robots to this private network. And you look at this picture, all the robots are, moving around, and you have to have a, MMTC use case, and you have to make sure that connection is stable, and, the robots can move as instructed precisely. So here is a puzzle, kid's puzzle. Can you tell the difference between the left image and the right image, the left graph and the right graph? So the left one is a public 4G, the band 19. And as soon as a plane arrives at the island, so suddenly lots of people are coming out of the aircraft and passing by the lobby of the airport. And then right after arrival of the aircraft, you start seeing the heavy congestion. So the data rate is shrank, and the latency increased up to like a 500 millisecond. That affects our avatar robots heavily. Some robots cannot move, stop operation. But if you look at the right-hand side, so this is a local 5G dedicated band network. So then there is no congestion at all. So the data rate stayed the same, and also latency is almost zero. Okay, so look at this. So avatar robots require mission-critical dedicated wireless network, and there the private network makes a lot of sense, because people might argue that we have a network slicing. NTT Docomo can put the network slicing there, and then assign one of the slices to a dedicated network for a robot operation usage. But they can't put the capacity in the first place because you can't justify the business here because there are not many people out there. So bringing in a private network, and in fact, this startup company tried Wi-Fi first, and it didn't work because lots of people are using tethering and Wi-Fi, smartphones are providing Wi-Fi. If you have 100 tethering terminals there, so then it messes up the Wi-Fi band, right? So, and they tried public 4G, but this problem happened. And then they talked to us, Aki, please provide your private network, the local 5G base station. And they are pretty happy. And then we are, recreating this use case in regional airport right now. It's expanding the business. Okay, this is my last slide. So prove me wrong. So the benefit of local 5G are many, and I listed up 4 bullets here. So it's good for use case exploration, and use case user-driven network can be built here. And also resilience. So the example of robot operation. So we are using licensed band and dedicated band, and we have operational security because you don't have to provide a password to get connected to the network. And also, this is related to 6G, but customization that we did can lead to a 6G standards. So we can do uplink optimization to get the video feed from the robots to the internet. We can define our own API, and we can provide the API economy, and also cross-layer optimization, cross-layer signaling, AI-based RAN, all sorts of research results can be put in local network, which may lead to the 6G standards. And when we talk about centimeter wave, so I'm hoping that we can use a centimeter wave, 7 to the 15 gigahertz band for local 5G or local 6G, I would say. So I'm part of the committee of how we use this frequency band in 6G. And then I'm approaching to the government that we should use a centimeter wave for local 5G first to explore use case and explore the resilience possibility, customization, and all that. And also one more thing. So the last point is the manageability. So if we ask telco to provide a service for users, so then we may not be able to manage the network. But if it is a private network, so then you can manage the network by yourself. So the manageability can be in the hand of users themselves. So this is the benefit that we have in a private network. Okay, so this is the end of my talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aki-san. And I have questions on the panel later about whether you can use it for neutral host purposes as well as private networks. And so I'd now like to welcome the third panelist to the stage. It's Mikko Isatala, who's the head of HexaX2 and also from Nokia. And hopefully we will have connectivity with 2G USB any second now. Right. Mikko, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Dean, for the introduction, and thanks for the organizers for the invitation. So yes, I'm Mikko Isatala, coming from Nokia Bell Labs Finland, leading radio research department here, and then also leading this HexaX2 European 6G flagship. And I will first present the kind of major overview on this approach towards 6G as then built in this HexaX2 community, and then after that reflect these use cases bit to this Wi-Fi relation. So HexaX2, the European 6G flagship, the second phase of this 44 member organizations, Nokia overall leader, excellent technical manager, and very good coverage of the entire value stack. And we started first with the HexaX project and laid down the vision for 6G to connect the physical, digital, and human worlds. The digital connection, building the models of physical and human worlds, and then humans and physical enabling efficient control for humans for the physical world. And then key values that should be reflected and included in all the discussion in 6G also in this session. So we should build this all on sustainability. We heard quite a lot on that before lunch, as well as inclusion and trustworthiness. And UN Sustainable Development Goals, a great starting point. And this was also very strongly coming into play, for example, by academic work by University of Oulu 6G flagship and other 6G initiatives building on top of this. So good direction. So then finally, these use cases. So here also in the center, again, the sustainability from all these points of view, environmental, physical, and social, environmental, social, and economic sustainability. Laying the groundwork, and then these use cases grouped into use case families, these different bubbles here. Starting from this immersive experience use case family, so enabling humans connect with each other, connect with machines, connect with some physically models that don't exist in physical reality anywhere, independent of location. Much of this going to happen indoors, but also quite some action here outdoors, some industrial metaverse immersive experience use cases. Then collaborative robots, looking at groups of robots augmenting our life as end users, or then helping some businesses. This obviously also outdoors, indoors. Physical awareness, the promise of 6G for bringing then the possibility of understanding the environment, sensing the environment on top of the communication, and this then applying also indoor, outdoor. Digital twins, so building these models, making it easier then to control, plan, operate, and have some predictive maintenance both for the physical world and for humans. And here there is quite a big demand for capacity outdoors for some large areas, and certainly also these models go indoors. Fully connected world, then quite far away from this indoors, providing connectivity remote locations and different kind of trusted environments, very much related in many cases to indoors. So then this was the HexaX2 foundation for the 6C approach, and then some personal observations, additionals here with respect to Wi-Fi. So certainly Wi-Fi cellular, both very strong technologies and continuing to be strong towards the 6G era, and Wi-Fi and cellular having certain kind of characteristics and areas where they are strong. And this same kind of main approach could well continue. So Wi-Fi can provide, especially indoors, can provide high data rates, but then not providing the very high reliability. And also then outdoors here, as you can see, quite high demand traffic use cases as well. And then with respect to security and spectrum availability, that was already touched in the introduction by Dean. Yeah, so if we look at this and extrapolate from here, so certainly many of these bubbles fall in quite naturally for either cellular track to continue or Wi-Fi track to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikko. If you'd like to take a seat, and if I can ask the rest of my panel to come up to the stage and take seats, and I'll get the other two panelists to introduce themselves as well. So one of the things you'll note here is that there's a lot of diversity in terms of the difference between public and private networks indoors, whether you use different technologies, and also the coexistence of multiple technologies. So yeah, I think that we're going to have an interesting set of discussions. Hopefully this will bring up the slide with everyone's name on it. Maybe not. But first off, I'd like to firstly ask Mikael from Ericsson to introduce yourself, what you do, and your thoughts on indoor. Mikael.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate that we also raise this more deployment question. And then, of course, before we should go into how to deploy 6G, we need to discuss what 6G should serve. I think we have been onto the topic very much yesterday. But for me, it's obvious that, you know, the world is now in a big digitalization era. And where we are in that exactly we can discuss, but there's no doubt that for every day or week that goes, there are both product services and things being more and more automized in hunt for efficiency, cost, easy to scale, and there, of course, connectivity becomes central. I think another trend is also that it goes mobile first in a way. So if you digitalize something today, you really think of that it needs to also work everywhere or anywhere, basically. So if that, you know, and then I just need to comment on what I picked up yesterday. There was some, you know, more disappointment statement around 5G. And I was a little bit surprised because, I mean, 5G works excellent for the use case that is on scale right now. I think also a lot of the digitalization, manufacturing, it's ITS, logistics, they are very interested in 5G. And it will go that way. But I think we also have to realize that this takes time. So, you know, maybe not building up new ecosystems, but, you know, modify ecosystem that takes time. But it's happening every day. So I think that we need to be prepared for. And that is that 6G will really be the workhorse for, you know, where we will be.
But
So-
it has to work everywhere, though.
Yeah, exactly. So coming then back, what does this mean to deployment? And then, you know, I think Nakamura-san also said that it's so important what happens on 5G, and that's exactly this. I think coupling to deployment, I think it's also very important to see what happens with 5G from now until we're going to launch 6G, because that's going to be the start point. We can't come with the 6G that requires a completely different deployment model. That, you know, then we are on another journey. So that is as important actually to relate to. So for me, it's not only indoor versus outdoor, you know, it has to be basically everywhere. I think also indoor, we has to be moderated. You know, of course we have the residential, but then we have, you know, everything from mines, it might be ports, warehouses, it might be big malls, you know, or even here. And so it has to be moderated. And so far, I think we have seen some prevalent deployment models starting with the leaky cables or the Wi-Fi options and so on. We have experimented with a little bit alternatives that hasn't taken off. So innovation in this space could be super important to solve this.
Thank you. Thank you. Last but not least, Matti from 6G Flagship. Go ahead.
So we started indoor cellular networks research 15 years ago. And actually there was one major EU project called BFEMTO. And we were investigating how to use 4G technologies in femtocellular environment. And as we know, it was really a big boom at those days. And for various reasons, it never really picked up. And I'm wondering even today, why not? As you said in the opening, that 80% of cellular traffic is generated from indoors. So it's really amazing that this femtocellular network concept never were deployed in large scales. Hopefully one day they will. It's energy efficiency issue. It's probably also a cost issue and a saving infrastructure costs for operator issue. But of course, operators would lose control of their own networks, and there might be issues related to that. But maybe in the future, when these private networks, local networks, when they are really kicking in, and there are new entrants in the markets anyways, maybe there's more acceptance to that. So after those femtocellular research initiatives, we started to work on what we called micro operator concepts, which is local operators. You can call it neutral hosting or whatever. But anyways, we started to look at those from, let's say, spectrum sharing perspectives. If we think about this big dream of 6G enabled metaverse and how it can be enabled, what enables it. But the bottom line is that we need huge capacity, really huge capacity to make this immersively amazing, new, visually amazing types of services possible. It means that we cannot really provide those in macrocellular settings for practical reasons. I mean, you just don't have capacity, it doesn't scale up. But in indoor settings, yes, of course. And then the question is how to enable those. We can go to higher spectrum bands. We are talking about sub-terahertz, above 100 gigahertz frequency bands, where the coverage is anyways rather short, and that what might enable it. Then Monisha, I think it was Monisha yesterday pointing out in spectrum sharing that in an indoor setting, for example, it might be possible to share spectrum with other legacy systems. Yes, of course. And we are talking about some tens of milliwatts or 10 milliwatts transmit power in these indoor femtocell type of base stations. So maybe spectrum sharing would be possible. If you think about big building concept, constellation, where you have lots of rooms, different rooms and spaces, you can centrally manage the network in one building easily these days. And it would lead to really interesting concepts. So I'm wondering why this has not happened yet.
Thank you very much for that. Mattia, as it happens, I saw my first small cell in 2001, a 2G small cell, and I followed the evolution of femtocells. First reason they didn't work was because you need multi-operator coverage, and it's only recently you had multi-operator small cells. And then there's also the challenge of backhaul and how you get to each cell in each room or in each building. Is that, do you use the twisted pair or the fiber or even the coax cable? Do you have to install it? There's a fundamental problem here, which is, can you get public networks working on private property? Because there you have the operators, you have the landlords, maybe the tenants, the local authority, maybe it's a protected building, whoever owns the wiring in the building. You end up with this multi-stakeholder problem. It's really complicated.
But in the same setting, I think you have to provide energy to those premises, and there's energy company giving you electricity, and somebody is wiring it. Very similar setting, and it's working. Somebody's reading the energy meters. And
I agree. I mean, I'd like to see it work. I've been following this for a long time.
But I think there are some interesting movements happening, and I've seen examples where actually building owners taking initiatives to actually make sure that they have cellular coverage, because the cellular coverage, end user just now expect. So suddenly, they feel that they are more or less obliged to do that.
Yeah, and it may be that they can get more rent per square meter or something like that.
Yeah, it gets more attractive.
Yeah, so fundamentally the problem with indoors is this economics which is behind what you were saying, and like the coverage that you can create with a certain amount of investment. So then like the research question is that how can you enhance then how widely you reach certain amount of square meters with certain kind of money, so also tied to how many access points you are having. So this is like the equation that also was like reducing the interest for example, this millimeter wave and higher frequency approach. So that is like quite much there. And then if it is challenging to reach that kind of economies to work, then the question is that if there is multiple operators providing connectivity for all of their end users indoors, so how can they then, if they cannot do that for their own customers, so then possible methods, how can they combine forces with so that there is like one investment for one network and then multiple players benefiting from that.
So Aki, and I don't know if this is true in Japan, but in the US, you are now starting to see private networks using CBRS in building, which, as well as used for maybe IoT or for private usage, also have a secondary use of what's called neutral host. It's a bit like roaming, but not quite, for the public networks onto the private network. At the moment, it's not legal to do that in Germany or the UK. Well, what's the situation in Japan?
The same thing in Japan. So we can't roam between a public network and a private network just yet, because there's a complex issue. Because some group of company, group company from NTT, so they are running this fixed network, now entering the business of local 5G. And here's NTT Docomo. And if you start roaming between these two, group company from NTT, so that is creating the monopoly of the market. So Japanese government, stops, very cautiously now.
That's interesting, because there seem to be, from a network sharing point of view, there seem to be both Mokken and Moran approaches to indoor sharing. But I want to leave the sort of the current situation and talk about some of the 6G innovations. What can we do in 6G technology innovation to improve either the sort of the indoor propagation, maybe using RIS or advanced MIMO in a map of the building and thinking that's a window which doesn't have low E glass, or is it that we can have a better approach to the indoor sharing? I don't know, Matti, if you have any, are you seeing anything in the technology development pathways that fits that?
I think we have to look at every potential in there. And our approach is I think twofold at least. One is that we have been developing these sub-terahertz RF technologies since the beginning of our flagship 2018, and our team has been doing lots of experiments already. It's not yet commercially viable. I mean, we don't have these chips available, and it will take a while that we are there. But I think that's one important factor, that we have really these high bandwidth, high frequency RF chips available. That would really be something significant. And of course, we understand that if that is becoming possibility and its spectrum is there, it's not, let's say, macrocellular deployment in any case anywhere. So that's one thing. Then the other thing is the spectrum sharing part, and how can we coexist with rather low power indoor mobile technology with some other legacy systems, whatever those are, and how can we control not to cause too much interference with those. So these are the things that we are looking at. Of course, regulators have assigned lots of spectrum bands around 3.5 gigahertz already for private networks, and that's available today. But we have to look at more innovative solutions, and I believe that, for example, in spectrum sharing domain, these latest advancements in machine learning algorithms would enable lots of different things.
Mikko, are you seeing, from your point of view, and any sort of innovations that really you can read across from the 6G radio evolution path? I think, well, that's suitable for indoors.
Yeah. So first of all, like there has been here already in the earlier comments several good choices mentioned, and Matti mentioned about these chips, and one challenge with that is this economy with this. And then machine learning was mentioned, and it is a tool that is very widely spread all over in 6G in many different ways as the tools with machine learning have become more powerful. So it should be seriously be looked at in all aspects, including this as well, how to enhance and optimize.
Mikko, I mean, obviously Ericsson has a big indoor cellular portfolio with the dot products.
Yeah.
Do you see an evolution path from that, or as you mentioned before, going through sort of 5G advanced? What's coming next insofar as you can tell us?
Yeah, no, I think of course indoor systems are here to stay, and then at the end it's of course at the same time also quite a lot of engineering here. I mean, you did the speed test up here, and you had actually higher downlink data rate on the cellular compared to the Wi-Fi. So it's not obvious. So outdoor to indoor sometimes is the good thing. You know, depending on the house, it could be one base station in the middle, and sometimes you need to go for the dot. So I have the feeling that unfortunately there is not one single, part. But I think the kind of indoor cellular dot, we have proven it also for the new use cases, and it seems like many of the manufacturers, or when we do it in the mines or in the factory halls and so on, it has turned out extremely good. And I think you have found similar findings there.
So I think the indoor or outdoor may not matter maybe. So the indoor means that you own your property and you want to operate your own private 5G, right? So as long as you own the land or the building, so then if you want to operate your own, so then I think the biggest issue is the regulation. As Matti pointed out, if you share the spectrum between private and public, so then you have to do the regulation right, because always there is an issue that, the private network has an issue and the public network. So, I mean, telcos are very picky about, the private part of the operation. And because they have to have some guarantee that they need to prove to the government. So then if a private spectrum comes into play, so then they have to take care of that somehow. And the responsibility-wise, they have to do something. So I think regulation must be put right.
I mean, one of the things I see is that the regulation for both private networks and spectrum sharing, and some of the things to do with indoor, it varies country to country. So there's different bands, there's different rules. In the US with CBRS, there's SAS, which is dynamic, but comes with a subscription fee. But you can use it for public and private. In UK and Germany and Japan, you've got plenty of spectrum for indoor use, but you can't use it for public, and there's not enough existing deployments. And then I know some countries have indoor-friendly other policies. So France has a rule that if a building has a distributed antenna system, then the operators have to connect to it with a published price list and specification requirements. And then there's Ireland has, I think, one of their auctions where they said, if you're bidding for this spectrum, then you have to cover these 500 named buildings of universities and hospitals and stations and things like that. But there's no example of best practice. I mean, so yeah, I don't even know if any regulators know what the coverage of their indoor floor space is. I don't know, Japan, does the government measure it or?
No, but I think, when we start using the frequency, high frequency band or spectrum, right? So as Marty earlier said, it's very hard to cover the area. So you have to go, hotspot, right? So then, if you put the hotspot by a private network, so then they can develop their own use cases. But if you want to build the large area, so then it's very hard. So inherently, you have to go with the private. And then you have to do, as you said, we have to have a good practice first to, cooperate a private network and the public network. But in Japan, we haven't seen that example yet.
Right, thanks. I'm going to ask questions from the floor in a second. So if you've got a question, put your hand up, and there's already a question down there. So I'll park my last question and throw it open to the floor for now.
Thank you, Joseph Noel, University of Oslo. I'd love to be a bit provocative.
Good.
Is it really boys have the toys that we have a panel just by men? And that the female aspects of 6G and the societal aspects of 6G are not addressed at all?
Well, I don't think the panelists themselves can claim to be involved in their own recruitment for the panel. And I know it's difficult to recruit people for panels. That said, I absolutely have to acknowledge Manisha in the front row, who is obviously a massive advocate for indoor connectivity. So I don't know, Manisha, if you've got anything you'd like to add to that.
Compared to ask the question only to this panel, there were a lot of panels that, yeah. And there's a term for that, they're not panels, they're manels.
I'm aware of that term, but yeah.
Of that boys have the toys. It's to the panels. And I really want to challenge you on
Yeah, maybe I can also reply to that a little bit. So the way I say things, maybe I say it maybe too much black and white, but when we look at now back 5 years of our, for example, background that we have been carrying out 6-year research, we have been mainly focusing on enabling this engineer's daydream of 6G enabled metaverse. That has been the main driver so far, and that is what industry is also pushing us towards too. So more bits through the channel with less euro spent on that, meaning also energy bill going down. So that's one aspect of that, and of course that's what we engineers are used to do. Now I think what has been forgotten, I agree with Noel on that these societal aspects have been a little bit neglected. UN SDGs is used and misused most of the time, quite a bit, and it's kind of a greenwashing, so to say, many times. But we should also look at the societal needs aspects and why do we need 6G? What justifies us to have the 6G? Why really we would need? For example, now everybody asks why 5G was not that successful as expected, because it didn't really hit the consumer markets. Probably that's why. What consumers would like to have in the future, we need coverage. We need much better coverage than we have today. And in many countries, we have really terrible coverage. Even in urban areas, we have terrible coverage. So that needs to be addressed. And if we have good coverage, then we can rely more and more to the needs of society. And yeah, so that needs to be addressed much more. I agree.
Yeah, no, to some extent, I would argue that there's different philosophies for 6G, and I think one of them, I was originally put a slide out there. One of them is what I sometimes call the metaverse for dolphins ideology, which is, I've heard people want underwater connectivity and I say, immersive. I'm like, okay, that's the dial everything up to 11 view of 6G. Then there is the some of the mobile operators who basically want to have slow and graceful evolution from 5G. The sort of, what do we want? Not much change. When do we want it? Not right now. Type view of the world. And then there's what I'll call maximum usefulness. And I think that's where 6G has an opportunity to fix specific problems. And some of that is on day one, make the network affordable everywhere, make it work everywhere, whether that's on a Pacific island or in a basement conference room, make it use less energy. And so my personal preference for 6G is maximum utility and usefulness rather than dial it all up to 11 for no readily apparent reason. But I'll yeah. Go.
So I think in order to address the societal aspect of 6G, I think, and 5G or 6G altogether, I think currently users are not benefiting or understanding the benefits of 5G or 6G yet. And I think this local 5G or private 5G activity is a very good tool so that people can understand the benefit of 5G because they can operate, they can compare public 4G, 5G, and private 5G, local 5G in your country. So then, Wi-Fi also, and then choose, what kind of, telecommunication technology that they should be using. I think, without this understanding, maybe we can't penetrate the market successfully.
A short follow-up. We see in Wi-Fi, we see a lot of guest networks. Wouldn't a 5G, 6G network slice for a guest access be a real good story for the society? Never asked for Wi-Fi password or this kind of stuff again.
Yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, in the certain places, why not? But I think that maybe is, it's more a regulatory or a governmental political kind of decision, right? It's not so. Then I think, I mean, I think we should look talking about the societal impact and aspect. I mean, the whole digitalization is going to make things better. It's no doubt about it. So, and then of course 6G, that is there to solve the networking part of this. And then, from technology perspective, we will walk the talk there and, try to do that as, call it cost in a wide sense here, efficient as possible. Might not only be dollars, it can be, it's of course energy and it can be materials and things like that.
Other questions? All right, looks like everyone has been stunned into silence by that. Okay, in that case, we've got 10 minutes left. I'd like to come back to the Wi-Fi theme, actually. I mean, the reality of the situation is that there's a lot of the world that has okay, sometimes very good Wi-Fi. How is the cellular industry, whether it's with 5G and 6G, going to work with Wi-Fi? Yeah, and we can say, we can have the 3GPP core control Wi-Fi, but that doesn't work. If I'm a hotel owner, I put my Wi-Fi system in from Cisco or Ruckus or whoever it is, I'm not going to rip it out and have the cellular controlled one. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we blend them together from the user perspective?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, Wi-Fi is very good for certain things. And so Wi-Fi should continue to be good at those things. And then I think 6G has its strength. It has been mentioned a lot, the resilience, security, and the robustness, the coverage, and so on. So that's where to focus. So when it comes to best effort traffic, Wi-Fi does a good job, if not too crowded, no mobility, and that's good. And then, but that doesn't prevent us from needing also window coverage for where the other kind of services will be needed.
So in fact, I gave my student an assignment, to check the difference between Wi-Fi and local 5G characteristics. And the conclusion that my students, came out with is that Wi-Fi is best effort And if you compare the bandwidth, if a single, terminal is using Wi-Fi, so then it's very good. But as soon as multiple terminals are sharing the bandwidth, so then you start seeing the very, variable jitters in the network, which is not, suitable for industrial use cases, for example.
And was that with which version of Wi-Fi? And was it in 2.4 or 5 gigahertz, or was it in 6 gigahertz, which is cleaner?
We compare all kinds of, up to Wi-Fi 6. We haven't tried
6E and 7 and 6
right.
gigahertz. Okay, yeah, because certainly, if given everyone's from a cellular side, I'll put my Wi-Fi hat here for a second and say certainly later versions have more. Firstly, access to 6 gigahertz in some countries, which is cleaner and doesn't have the legacy systems, and also supports things like essentially the Wi-Fi version of carrier aggregation called multi-link operation, or also multi-user MIMO, which gets some way to that.
Well, some of us are old enough to remember 25 years ago this grand era of ultra-wideband communications. And there were lots of very interesting. I loved it. I really loved it. There were lots of interesting concepts coming out, and then there was this wireless HD concept, which aimed at the 60 gigahertz utilization and multi-carrier OFDM type of deployment. So it wasn't successful at all, but technology was ready, and it was quite complementary to Wi-Fi and cellular and everything, but it didn't fly. So there are lots of different technologies already now enabling indoor local connectivity, and there will be more in the future when we have these sub-terahertz technologies coming up, for example. So it's not a technological issue, but probably it's a business model issue more than anything else. And for example, we have been challenged and asked over these 5 years in 6G flagship that what is 6G and what is 6G radio, and what we keep telling that we think about multiple technology capabilities enabling this kind of metaverse thinking, and which is super efficient local connectivity. And you can have different solutions for that, and you should use what is best for your purpose.
Thank you. I think we have I've got the lights in my eyes here. I think there's a question up in the top of the gallery there.
Yeah. So houses didn't used to come with plumbing. They come with plumbing now. Houses didn't used to come with electricity. They all have electricity now. We had Ethernet connections. How come houses aren't designed for wireless? And why isn't the industry in bed with, say, Stanley Homes in the United States? Why isn't there a Stanley Homes branded by Verizon?
That's a good question. I'll expand that and say, how can we work better with the property industry? That it's not just for homes, but also for offices and commercial buildings like this, to make wireless work better indoors.
At least one aspect that comes into mind is that if we talk about the real estate and the cost of the whole real and then the cost of like communication system in that real estate. So overall construction area, they are spending very little money on R&D, and there is a very heavy driver just for lower cost. So usually in construction, that's the main driver. And usually I would expect that they have quite little bandwidth for other optimization directions.
But construction industry is extremely keen on exploring capabilities in for example, in construction safety area. So we talk about this life cycle of the building, and so from the construction phase to the operation phase. And when you're building the actual building, you could be building already the network infrastructure gradually. You use it for different purpose in the construction phase, and when it's used for some other purpose, then it's used for different extent. Bigger companies, they are really keen on these, but we have never invited them to this type of events, for example, before. And Aki and myself, we are working hard in Japan to make it happen now.
Yeah, well, so people love, untethered network, right? So then, but at the same time, they look for the same quality as the fixed network. For example, it has to be very reliable, not like a best effort network. So, for example, let's get back to the Wi-Fi example. So Wi-Fi is best effort unlicensed. People start using that, but some, people don't like the instability of Wi-Fi. and look for like dedicated 5G network as a replacement of the fixed network. And lots of industry like factories in Japan, maybe a building and construction company also. So they are looking for a stable connectivity, just like Ethernet, but we can't beat Ethernet. But as long as it is stable, so then they start changing from the fixed network to the wireless because they love untethered network.
Thank you.
Yeah, going back to the thing about the construction industry, a concrete example at the University of Chicago, they built this brand new, very fancy auditorium and an office complex. And at least in the US, all new buildings are so-called LEED certified, and they're like Faraday cages. I mean, they have all of these thermally efficient, very low energy loss, but they're also let in very low art. After the building was completed, they realized that, this is a building that we have a lot of guests coming in and they want their phones to work and they don't want to go onto Wi-Fi. They just want their phones to work. So then they had to spend an additional, I don't know how much money to put in a distributed antenna system, right? And so it is absolutely the case that, yes, retrofitting old buildings is one thing, but as you're looking at construction, there has to be a connection that, connectivity is important. And pulling on that link, as in, Dean, you mentioned about the neutral host model in the US, it is actually, I mean, some of these places, there is a third party that's doing this. So the operator is not responsible for maintaining a network inside a building. The building owner contracts it out to a third party who deploys this private network in CBRS. And then, say, T-Mobile or Verizon has a contract with this third party that their customers will roam onto the network. Is something like that considered against the rules in, say, Japan or UK or Europe right now? Would that?
It is slightly different. There's alternative approaches to neutral hosts, which are more like essentially glorified versions of DAS. So it's more Moran rather than Mocken. But I think the interesting one, I had someone who came to one of my workshops recently who said, I think it's UAE in the Gulf, Dubai in particular, where I think they now have something in the building codes that say if you're building you're a large high rise or something like that, you need to have connectivity in there. And I think what I'd really like is to have examples of this type of sort of pro indoor policy from around the world and just sort of try and come up with a list of them initially and then best practice. I think
because there is a safety aspect to it too. If your building is a Faraday cage and you're not on Wi-Fi, you're really putting people at risk in there if there are no landlines anymore anywhere. So you're pretty much reliant on. Another quick question, and we didn't really talk about it much, is I'd like to get a sense of what people think about 5G and RU and how that could be used to handle some of these issues and why it applies in the industry.
I agree. I think we at the industry have been very, we have made the trials in 4G with the LAA and, certain, and it didn't really play out. We put NRU, basically 5G on unlicensed in place, but it didn't so far. No, exactly, and I guess it's a sign that where the ecosystem need to decide that we're going to need it because we need the devices and we need the base stations and and someone to that also pays for it at the end, right? But I think from 6G perspective, I think that question is should need some more debate.
Yes, yeah. I have my own theory why we don't see more of 5G NRU. This is unlicensed 5G. It's because we would get inevitably free 5G hotspots, which I'm sure my friend from Oslo would like. But I think that would be a risk, and I think it's one of the reasons the industry's not been keen on it. But I think we are now out of time. Thank you all very much for this. We've covered quite a lot of territory on this. Private networks, neutral host, Wi-Fi, indoor 6G, innovations around the radio. There's a lot more to discuss. I'd like to thank Alex as well for having this session at the event. I'd like to see more conferences with indoor panels or speakers It is important and it is underestimated. So anything people can do to raise awareness is beneficial. Thank you all very much indeed.